Hello and welcome to our Reboot review. I'm Paul,
And I'm Dave.
and this week we are discussing the season one finale, the two-parter, titled "Identity Crisis: Part One and Two." These episodes originally aired Part One, January 14th, 1995, in Canada, not airing until September 9th in the States, and Part Two aired January 21st, 1995, in Canada, and again not airing until September 16th, 1995, in the US. I don't know why, but I don't really care.
Meh.
Anyway, let us start off with the number one film at the box office this week, Dave.
Oh, shoot. In 95 at the start of the year.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
It feels like it's an Oscar bait movie to me, just looking at it and the cast and everything.
No, it's not too surprising. It's kind of the norm, but there's nothing that's immediately jumping to mind.
I'm almost certain you've never heard of this film. It's a movie called Legends of the Fall.
Not surprised with the titling, but also just kind of vague enough to be like, I have no idea what this movie's about.
It's apparently it's an epic Western drama.
Yeah, that somewhat tracks for around the time.
It's Brad Pitt, Anthony Hopkins, Aidan Quinn. It's a pretty good cast, and apparently it's based off of a novella.
Mm.
So, I mean, I guess that's something. And that's the number one film for both weeks. I'm just gonna
Okay, to clarify.
yes. So, the number one song in America this week, Dave, or these weeks, I should say. What are we thinking?
Oh, is it gonna be some new face that pops out onto the scene, or is it still gonna be Boys to Men attacking the airwaves with their music?
It is still Boys to Men on Bended Knee.
Just for the 1 week or both?
For both. For both. For both.
Ah,
Although,
again.
next week they would be overtaken by Creep by TLC. Which certainly was a
No, not
song.
surprising. As soon as you mentioned it, there were about the 3,527 different versions that have been done since that song came out.
No, it's not the version you're thinking of, Dave.
Oh,
It's a
I'm so
different song
sorry,
called
song.
Creep.
I'm so sorry, song.
No, it's I take it you don't know who TLC are.
No, not immediately ringing a bell. Like the name is there, but it's like mixed with a whole bunch of other particular sort of things.
They were like it was three women and it was like a rap thing or like R&B whatever. I don't know how to differentiate the two necessarily.
Eh.
But yeah, this is a totally different song. It's yeah, I think it's about like infidelity or something. It's not the
Not
Creep
somewhat
song you're thinking of.
understandable with the girl group.
Yeah, it's not the song you're thinking of though.
No, mild sadness, but nevertheless.
And finally, let us chat a little bit about some video games at the time.
What sort of video games?
There's really not many notable releases early in the year because it's early in the year. But seeing as
In
the next episode doesn't air until August, I figured we'd do a quick little look at kind of see what released that summer. So,
hmm
just before the first episode we're talking about released, a little game called Bust a Move on the SNES came out.
Supposed yay.
You're
Like
not really a Bust a Move guy?
the name rings somewhat of a bell, but it's like I think either supposedly sports game because the other thought was dance game, and on the one hand, it's probably not impossible for the SNES. I would very much question if it bothered getting any sort of traction around that time.
No, no. Bust a Move is it's like a puzzle game kind of. It's that one where you have like all the like bubbles up at the top, and you have the little thing you have to shoot them and match the colors.
Oh my gosh, it is that game. Everything's flooding back to my mind. It's insane. But yes, yeah, it's also a marvelous case of the 90s of a thing that's popular in Japan that looks tremendously cutesy and whatnot needs to come over to the States and be like, we need to give this some edge. Slap ridiculous things onto it. It's like perfect.
Yeah. Anyway, this later in the year, throughout between now and our next episode, we'd get a few little games that would come out. So mid February, we'd get this little game on the PC called Star Wars Dark Forces. Are you familiar with Dark
Ooh,
Forces?
no.
Oh, okay. It might not be the first, but it's one of the first Star Wars FPS games.
Oh, okay.
In March, we would get Panzer Dragoon on the Saturn.
Ooh, yes.
Also in March, on if you were a Super Nintendo kind of guy or gal, you would get Chrono Trigger.
Oh, neat.
Also in March, if you were more into like a Kirby kind of feel on the Game Boy, you got Kirby's Dream Land 2.
Yes, the Cubbies.
Also in March, if you had a Super Nintendo, you could pick up Mega Man 7.
Yes.
In April, if you were on if you had a Super Nintendo, you could pick up this little game called Super Bomberman 3. I love the Bomberman games; they're so good.
Bomberman was definitely fairly good. And then some of the stuff happened. He's still somewhat around, but still, later on, that was a dark time.
Yeah,
Such
it
a dark.
was. Also in April, if you had basically any platform ever, you could pick up this little game called Mortal Kombat 3.
Yes.
Uh, in June, if you had a Super Nintendo, my god, this was a hell of a year for RPGs. You could pick up Earthbound.
Yes. The Earthbounds, with a case of mildly interesting, and people were like, eh. But then it got its cult faltering, and it was like, oh my gosh.
Yes. If you were an arcade gamer, in June you could play Tekken 2.
Ooh, the tech hunt.
Tekken is very good. And we just have one more, well, two more pretty big. Well, one wasn't a super big game. In early August, you could pick up this little game called Comic Zone.
Yes. The marvelous case of discovering this thing existed on the downloadable sites, and it's like, oh my God, I never realized that they actually made a comic book style game in this time frame of game design.
Yes. Also in August, if you were a Super Nintendo gamer, you could pick up this little game. I'm sure nobody's heard of it. Called Super Mario World 2 Yoshi's Island.
Yes, the marvelousness and mild cases of trippiness of this particular game.
Yes. So that basically would bring us up to when season 2 begins. But let us go into the episodes, David. What happened in these episodes?
Oh man, some stuff happened in this episode.
Right. So we start off with Bob in a war game kind of thing, although he's just basically taking a nap and trying to fish, which, I mean, fair enough. Um, then Enzo picks him up with the tank. That's not a joke. He actually picks him up with the like cannon on the tank. And the user's all fucked up because he's like stuck driving a tank. And I'm like, I remember playing Battlefield 1942 too. And then after we get out of the game, oh yeah, we find out that Dot is trying to get PID codes from the programs or whatever in this sector, so that they won't be under Megabyte's control anymore or something. I'm not entirely sure how this all works.
And I like to think of it as essentially wherever Megabyte's tower is situated is categorized as his zone of influence. And like any computer and whatnot trying to purge a virus, it works on trying to get through each of the files and decorrupt them or make sure that they can't be corrupted.
Okay. So she ends up getting the programs, or well, I don't know exactly what they're meant to be, but she gets them to agree to give her the PID codes so that she can take them back and enter them into the operating system. A lot of this doesn't make sense if you actually think about it in terms of how a computer functions.
Yeah, no, it mostly just fits into the story. Make sure to help the people so they don't get under the influence of Megabyte with all the
Yeah.
evilness. Ugh.
So then there's a chase, and they go through the sewers, and at one point they're driving like this armored vehicle, and Bob says "cowabunga" because it's 95 and the turtles are probably still big.
Yeah, yeah.
What else happens in the first part, Dave? Help me out here.
Well, there's one additional character that we're introduced within this by the name of, I believe I have it right with the pronunciation, Cyril.
Yes. Although I feel like he's been in the background in a few other episodes, but
It wouldn't be surprising, aside from the one or two things that differentiate him. He does have the generic kind of look to him, modeling wise, but he assists Dot with following along with the program they're going with, giving them an escape route until at the end of the episode, surprise, he actually stole all the particular stuff and sent it over to Megabyte.
yes, he betrays them. Oh, also, you could probably hear me cheering from like the other side of town when we find out that Enzo won't be joining them for this adventure.
Okay. Just the case of, oh man, we got serious business. And it's like, Enzo, you stay at the Dot's Diner with everyone because this is important business. He's like, okay.
Yes, that was. I was like, oh, thank God. And then it got. And then in part two,
Oh, don't head just yet. We have the cliffhanger of Bob was mentioning inside of the game to Enzo that, oh man, the war style game was bad because the user doesn't know what he's doing. But Bob says it could have been a whole lot worse because they could be in
the
the
fun
fun
zone.
house.
Oh yeah, the fun house. Yes. And
And
at the
what
end of the
game decides
episode,
to drop
they're
on Bob and Dot as they escape and realize that Megabyte has stolen all the particular access codes and whatnot for all those people? They get stuck in the funhouse. So it's gonna be a grand old time heading into part two.
yes. And then in part two, we find they have to go through the fun house, but Dot's basically given up on life because she's like, oh, I fucked up, and now I'm not gonna try anymore. And Bob's
Mm.
kind of a dick to her, and then nothing really like they get through the funhouse and then they stop Megabyte and oh wait no, I forgot an
Yeah, you
important
need
part.
to remember the big interesting thing. Dot's been going through some stuff.
Yes,
Not super well explained in the episode, but she has visions and plays of things of stuff to supposedly happen or yet to come, where she sees a terrible future of if Megabyte completes uh, virally infecting a whole bunch of people in the sector and whatnot. And oh man, it's not great.
yes. So we see this like she goes into this like vision or whatever it's supposed to be. Who knows? And Dot's diner has been changed to whose name is on it?
It's Nibbles.
Nibbles Diner, and she goes in there and she's like, "What the fuck's going on?" And then Enzo comes in, but he's a moody teenager, which oh god, I thought he was annoying as a child, but I might have been wrong, David.
Interesting, because I was curious about your reaction of what would happen if they aged him up a little bit, putting him more into this sort of style of setting.
Yeah, it wasn't good. His terrible mustache was funny though.
Mm.
So then Dot goes on the run and goes to find Fong, and we find Fong has basically gone insane and is living in the sewers
Yeah.
in a
Yeah.
box. And this is where my favorite little reference came in. Did you notice this?
There were a couple things within that. I'm not sure if it was a case of whether the box he was inside of or something that he was pulling out of his little drawer.
Oh no, so okay, so the box is the box that what the dog came in.
Yes.
I can't remember the dog's name though.
Brisket.
Right. But there's another one. Did you see the little penguin?
Yes. The one particular thing that was like, should I supposedly mention this within the episode? Nah, it's a small little reference. It probably wouldn't matter.
It's Feathers McGraw.
Yes.
Are you familiar with Wallace and Gromit at all?
Yes, I am.
Okay. I wasn't sure because I'm like I've probably forced you to watch Wallace and Gromit at some point. But yes, it's Feathers McGraw from The Wrong Trousers, and that made me very happy.
Yes.
because I do love Wallace and Gromit. So I was quite happy about that. And apparently, doing a little research, we're going to see more of Feathers throughout the series.
Interesting.
So that I will be very happy to see that. So Dot ends up getting through this vision doohickey thing. I don't really know what exactly it's meant to be. We find out. Oh yeah, we find out that Bob has basically been turned into a blob of mercury, and he's useless at this point. In her
Yeah, he got nullified.
yeah, and she finds a way out of this vision, and they stop Megabyte, and nothing really fucking happens in the end.
Yeah, kind of those particular sort of things with this episode, because there's the concern of, oh man, they have all the codes and whatnot, but they were smart about it and made sure that everything was encrypted.
Yeah, and then Megabyte and his goons can't break the encryption, and then they're able to stop him just before he finishes decrypting these files, which
Hmm.
is awfully convenient, but okay. Oh, and we find out that Cyril is actually Cyrus, and I was like, I wonder, I wonder if that was um. Let me just do a quick Google here, because I wonder if that was a reference to something else. Let me just. Oh no, that came much later. Okay, never mind. It's not.
Mm.
Because there was a character in ECW called Cyrus the Virus, and I was like, I wonder if that's a reference, but that wasn't until '99. So,
Okay.
but yeah, this was a kind of a fine two-parter. I thought. It kind of nothing happens in the end, but I think that's the biggest problem I have. The other problem, okay, not necessarily problem, but the other thing I noticed is like this is the first season finale, and we don't get an appearance, or at least, I mean, there might have been something in the background that I missed, but we don't get appearance from Mouse or Hexadecimal.
For many of those characters. No, that's true. Like, the closest thing would be the Dot's Diners in the Bad Vision of Things is named after Nibbles, which is the pet of Hexadecimal. It's just a case of, yeah, the two characters that would have been good, but they don't bother including them.
Yeah, I was kind of like, where are we gonna get? Where's Hexadecimal? Why hasn't she made an appearance? And why hasn't Mouse come back? Because I liked Mouse.
Yes, Mouse is very interesting, as well as Hexadecimal. And I must say that in the future, next couple of episodes, she'll get some involvement. It will come. But again, it's one of the particular things that either just with either storyboarding, what they kind of had on hand, and maybe just with the ideas, it works well enough. But it's one of those particular sort of episodes that I'm like, I wouldn't be surprised if they shorten this down. They could just make this a simple one filler episode in the series.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of that stuff with Dot's like vision of the future or whatever, I'm like, this kind of doesn't need to be here. Like it's interesting in a way, kind of like seeing this like dystopian version of Mainframe, but I'm like, it's not really important to the story unless they pick it up later on, which I don't know. But yeah, I was kind of like, oh, okay.
Mm, yeah, with any of that. And again, I mentioned a little bit before this episode, but just with the thoughts, I was mildly surprised coming into this two-parter that starting the episode, it's like, wow, it's been so long, I have no idea how this episode's gonna go. But then it gets to the end of the episode, it's like, oh my gosh, it's this episode.
See, I haven't remembered really any of these, which
Because
is
pretty much the only one thing I remember about these two episodes is the funhouse level. And it's one of the interesting little spices to the story of if they get caught up in a GameCube, that they get thrown into these different sort of scenarios, whether it's a sports competition, fighting in a war, or getting caught up in the funhouse.
yeah. I like one of the things I actually like about the game, or the game about the series is like the games they go into.
Mhm.
Like that's one of the things where I'm like, okay, like that's actually really interesting. Like If we could do more of that and less of the other nonsense. But that's just me.
Yeah, understandable. And again, it also fits with what as well within the story of there's this important thing that they're trying to get done and whatnot, and a game can distract from that, but also it might be a case of they probably could have split the stories in two and had them in easier sort of situations. Because even within the game, there was only so much that they were able to show off with it, which either time wise or how much that they could supposedly put into it. But again, splitting the two could actually make two really interesting episodes.
Yeah, totally. I totally agree. Totally. Yeah. So, like I said, this was fine, and I'm interested to see where season two goes. So, the first episode of season two is titled Infected, which is a pretty good title. Disguised as an upgrade, Megabyte enters mainframe's core central chamber. He badly hurts Fong and initiates an erase command that almost destroys the system, only to be thwarted by Bob exploiting his greed. Hexadecimal hints at a surprising connection to Megabyte. Oh, I don't like that phrase.
Yeah, yeah. Though, no, it will definitely be interesting heading into that because out of curiosity, what was your thought on most of the plans that Megabyte kind of tries to work with or to enact his evilness and whatnot on the system?
Most of his plans are dumb. Like, I'm sorry, but they are. Like,
Okay. And just heading into this next episode with what it has in the summary, do you think it's a bit of a change up from his style, or do you still think it's a case of this seems kind of dumb, Megabyte?
I. Okay. I think my biggest problem is Megabyte doesn't feel like a serious villain.
Okay.
He feels like he's more competent than Hack and Slash, but like barely.
There's
Like
still the occasional time that he gets caught up in the coyote falling sequence sort of thing in
exactly.
some cases.
Yeah. So I'm hoping that they take him more seriously in upcoming episodes because he's a bit kind of bumbling for my liking.
Okay. Well, as I always like to think that any sort of series that continues on can only improve as long as things are fairly good. There are some cases that that's not the case, but we can only hope in some cases.
We can hope. So until next time, I'm Paul.
And I'm Dave.